Hello, and thank you for joining the Vegetable Education Conference as part of the 2021 Virtual Southeast Regional Fruit and Vegetable Conference. I am Brian Hayes, the County Extension Coordinator and A&R Agent with UGA Extension in Mitchell County, and I will be the moderator for this presentation. I'd like to thank Bayer Seminis for sponsoring the 2021 Vegetable Education Conference. Let's watch a short video provided by Bayer Seminis. Pesticide CEUs and CCA credits are available for most presentations offered during the live regional conference. Check the Pesticide CEU guide for a list of approved presentations and participating states. The Pesticide CEU guide is located in the Events Resource tab under the Media player. The guide is also available at the Resource Center located on the main menu of the conference platform. Please note, pesticide credits will only be available for one registered attendees and only during live conferences. Credits will not be available for on-demand viewing. There's a simple three-step process for receiving pesticide CEUs and CCA credits. First, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of the screen and type your first and last name and the state in which you are requesting credits. Again, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen and type your first and last name and the state which you are requesting credits. You will need to do this for every presentation you request CEU credits. The second step is to sign out at the end of every presentation. To sign out, again, go to the audience chat box and type your first and last name and the state for which you are requesting credits. You will be reminded to sign out at the end of each presentation. The third step is to complete the pesticide CEU registration. You only have to complete this registration one time during the conference. This is not required for every presentation. To access the Pesticide CEU registration web link, open the Pesticide CEU guide in the Events Resource tab located under the Media player. The Pesticide CEU registration web link is located on the front cover of the guide. This presentation is pre-recorded to reduce technical difficulties. We will be answering your questions live at the end of the presentation. You can submit a question at any point during this presentation by typing your question in the question box and pressing send. Don't forget to thank our 2021 conference sponsors and exhibitors by visiting the virtual trade show and featured product pavilion. Lastly, don't forget to join us each morning for coffee chats and each evening for networking. Check the conference agenda for details. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Stormy Sparks, professor of UGA with UGA Extension, who will be presenting an update on insecticide efficacy and resistance in whiteflies. Dr. Sparks got his PhD from LSU and spent 14 years with Texas A&M Agricultural Extension and has been with UGA Extension for the past 17. He has 30 plus years experience working with vegetable IPM. And this whitefly resistance is very important for us here, at least in Georgia. That's a major problem, major pest we have every year. So we're looking forward to hearing Dr. Sparks' update. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian indicated, I'm going to talk very briefly about insecticide efficacy work that we've done this past year and some research that's being done on developing techniques for monitoring resistance in whiteflies, which is a big issue, potential issue for us as well. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the whitefly situation in 2020. While the fall was not a good situation for us, it was not nearly as bad as I had anticipated it would be. Coming out of the summer, we had some very high populations in spots, and in fact, in the spring, we had some vegetables that had some of the highest populations I've seen any time of the year. Viruses were also detected early. We were detecting a lot of virus at the end of the spring crop. So we were really set up for almost a disaster, similar to 2017, and that simply didn't happen. We didn't have the population explosion that we were anticipating in August and September. I think we got a lot of help from just natural biological control. If you saw a lot of adult whiteflies with the white tufts growing out of them, that's Assyria. We had a lot of natural infection from Assyria. But I also think we need to thank cotton growers. They did a good job, I believe, this year of addressing whiteflies in the cotton, much better than they were able to in 2017. And that reduced our potential problems in the fall. So I really think overall this year demonstrated our ability to manage the pest on an area-wide basis. The cotton growers helped us. Now it's our job to help them for next year. We need to control whiteflies in our winter and spring crops, which we normally do a very good job of. The one area where we've really improved, I think, but there's still some room for improvement, is destruction of crop residues when we're done with them, so that we don't have whiteflies reproducing. This is probably a bigger problem in watermelons than other crops, simply because we've got a lot more watermelons, a lot more growers involved, and whiteflies not a big issue in watermelons, but they do watermelons allow whiteflies to build up if we don't get rid of those residues. So that's something we really need to continue to pay attention to in the future. As far as new insecticides for whiteflies, we really don't have anything new. We do have one new product from Valent called Sinstar. It is actually a premix of two products that we already use for whiteflies. The active ingredients in there are spirotetramat, which is the active ingredient from Movento, and pyroproxyfen, which is the active ingredient from NAC. If you put out a full rate of Sinstar, you're putting out a full rate of Movento and a 40% rate of NAC. So it's not a full 100% mixture. One thing to be aware of with Sinstar, similar to Movento, is that you really need to use a penetrating adjuvant with it. That helps the active ingredient, the spirotetramat, get into the plant, and then it's very systemic. Once it's in there, it'll move into phloem and the xylem, which is fairly unique. But you've got to have that penetrating surfactant. Do not put a sticking surfactant with it. This is primarily going to use for whiteflies, is what we're talking about, but also very good on aphids. It's fairly broadly labeled. As you can see, anything where Movento is labeled and NAC is labeled will have the premix labeled as well. In most crops, it's a 7-day pre-harvest interval, fruit and vegetables 1 day, and the re-entry interval is 24 hours. This slide just simply shows you some data. We did a number of trials with Sinstar this last year. First of all, you can see we look at venerate. We're still looking at a lot of different products, the biorationals and everything else. But what I really want to emphasize here is if you look at the lower 3 lines, the Sinstar plus Impede, Sinstar plus Silwet, and Movento. In general, the Sinstar is working as well as the Movento or NAC individually. I can't necessarily say it's working better than those two, but it is working as well as either of those individually. So it does work for whiteflies. Field evaluation of insecticides, we do this in a number of different ways. First of all, we do look at adult mortality in many cases. Typically, 24 hours after application, we do a leaf turn and count the number of adults on the leaf. We work in the squash system because squash is extremely sensitive to very low populations of whiteflies. Anything that works in the squash silverleaf system is going to work extremely well for us on whiteflies. And then where we want to look just at nymph counts, we'll look at something like cucumbers, tomatoes. We do a variety of different crops there. First of all, looking at adult efficacy, nothing different from last year. The two products that consistently look the best for us on adult whiteflies are Pqz and Savanto Prime, irrespective of the crop we're looking at. In this particular case, XRL looked pretty good as well. Frequently, Venom will look good, but by far our best two products, again, for adults alone are Pqz and Savanto Prime. Most of our products are really designed and work best against immature stages. As far as insecticide drench evaluations this last year, this is something I've been doing for over a decade now with this high-tech tool you see here in the middle. We apply the application on about a 4-inch band to mimic a chemigation through the drip system or in-furrow spray, and then monitor what silverleaf symptoms in squash as it grows. And as you can see in the slide on the right, the flag is at the beginning or end of a plot, and then you can see the white squash beyond that. We can get very clear-cut differences with this approach as far as looking at these systemic insecticides. As I said, we've been doing this for well over a decade. This last year, first of all, you can see here that the Admire Pro did not work a whole lot better than the Check. And for some reason, that's something we've seen for about the last 3 years now. Our other products, systemic products, Verimark, Coragen, Savanto Prime, and Venom, are all lasting about 3 weeks, which is what we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years. In 2007, it was down to about a week. When they first came out, it was 4 to 6 weeks. I think this 3-week period is about what we're locked in on now, as long as we keep in a good rotation and don't select for any severe resistance. But right now, that's what we're looking at. Still is about 3 weeks control with these systemic products. For foliar applications in the squash system, we do something similar. We'll plant it, let it come up, start spraying fairly early, put on 2 applications, and then again monitor silverleaf development. This is very late in these trials. You see these pictures here, but you see that we do have some products that are working, some that have failed that far into the test. In this particular test, we've got NAC Courier, Sinstar, Actara, Pqz, Acel, Venom, Savanto Prime, X-Rail, and Coragen. Most of these are products that we would kind of expect to have good efficacy and be able to stand alone, even in the squash system. And you can see that particularly with the Group 28s, X-Rail and Coragen. X-Rail continues to be our best product for whiteflies. We've got other very good products, but X-Rail tends to be our best product. Savanto Prime and Venom and even Acel look pretty good in these situations. And these are standalone tests, which is very tough for them to stand up. These other products, the NAC Courier, Sinstar, Actara, Pqz, have activity that we know they're good products, but they just simply in that squash system, because it's so sensitive, they can't stand up there as a standalone products. Similarly, looking at some of our not less efficacious, but those products that aren't necessarily standalone. This is a test where we actually did a Verimark drench and then came in with a foliar application starting at 12 days after that drench, 2 applications, and monitored efficacy. Again, all of these products down here have efficacy against whiteflies, but they really don't stand up very, very well in that squash system because of the sensitivity of squash to whiteflies. The one that really stands out here, again, is X-Rail. As I said, it continues to be probably our strongest whitefly product. Now, if you go to cucumbers, here you can see Safina, Movento, Pqz, Sinstar, NAC, Savanto Prime, and X-Rail. Again, all of these products are looking better than the Check. Movento's a little bit slower. NAC had high populations and then brought it down because of its mode of action. You would expect this kind of activity, but you're seeing good activity with all of these products. Here you can see where X-Rail, again, is a little bit stronger even in this system. That's why it works in the squash, but all of these are giving us pretty good control of whiteflies with foliar applications. And these are the control of the whitefly nymphs. All right, so the other thing we've been looking at and looked at it more intensively this year is the question of whether or not we can impact virus transmission, whitefly transmitted viruses with insecticides in Georgia. It's been reported in other areas and in lab studies, but the South Georgia pest situation is different. In some areas where they're showing virus suppression, they're dealing with whiteflies, low populations year round. we have these huge populations in the fall that can very easily overwhelm a system. So that's what we're looking at. We're trying to figure, I have seen it rarely in the South Georgia area where we see effects of insecticides on virus transmission, but it's been very rare. It's more frequently we don't see an impact. So the question is there a time of year or is there a situation where we have low whitefly pressure or low virus pressure where insecticides will help us? And that's what we tried to look at this last year in this particular study. We looked at yellow squash and cucurbit leaf crumple virus, primarily, others as well. But we went in, we did 10 weekly plantings starting in late June through August. In each planting, we did 4 replications of 4 treatments. We had a Verimark drench where we drenched at planting and came back and did it 3 weeks post-planting. Not something we'd recommend in a commercial situation, but for whitefly control, we were looking at this as probably being our best treatment for nymph control. We had a Pqz Foliar Treatment where we started it a week after planting. So we're basically spraying cotyledons or 1 true leaf plants. And we sprayed weekly with Pqz. Pqz we know is excellent on adults, so it's knocking down those populations. And its mode of action should stop feeding. So hopefully we're wanting to look to see if we could impact virus transmission with this mode of action. And then we looked at the combination of the Verimark and Pqz and compared all that to a non-treated control. Now, first of all, looking at the whitefly adult population in the test, the red and blue lines are the check and Verimark treatment. As you can see, we did have fairly high populations. We're up in here in the 200 per leaf range. And where we were putting out Pqz, which is the black and gray lines along the bottom, we did get excellent activity against the adults. Now, this is at 24 hours after treatment. They'll move back in after that, so you may get some transmission from that as well. But the bottom line is we did get good activity on adults with the Pqz. The other thing you can see here is that lack of an explosion in the population in August and September. As we're going into August, you see the population increasing, and then you would expect it to just go out the roof, and that just simply didn't happen this year. But we did get good activity out of our insecticides as far as adult control of Pqz. If you look at silverleaf ratings in these plots, that's all 10 plantings. To make it a little easier to see, we'll just look at the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th planting. You can see the silverleaf ratings where we had Verimark applied, which are the red and black lines. We did reduce silverleaf or delayed silverleaf symptoms in those plots. So our Verimark treatments did do what we expected them to do as far as controlling nymphs, is what this would really indicate. And then when we look at percent virus incidence, first of all, we had almost no virus in the first 2 plantings, less than 5% at the time those crops were destroyed. So one of our objectives was to start early enough that we didn't have much virus to work with. And then we wanted to get late enough. You see down here the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th planting where virus incidence was very rapid in movement into those plots and very high levels. We had no impact there as well. It's this middle area where we're kind of starting with virus. Whiteflies are building. We were hoping to see some impact, but in reality, we never saw any significant impact there as well. This is an example, planting 4. You see a little bit of variation in there with insecticides, but actually we ended up in this particular planting with our lowest virus incidence being in the non-treated check. So bottom line out of all of this work, first of all, we did get good efficacy with Pqz as far as knocking down adults. We got good efficacy out of Verimark on nymphs as indicated by the reduction in silverleaf rating, but we saw no significant interaction or effect on virus transmission. It's just simply by the time it comes in our system, typically we've got enough whiteflies, we've got enough virus that it overwhelms any impacts from insecticides very rapidly. I want to touch on insecticide resistance monitoring very rapidly. Dr. Riley and Tanner Sparks, his graduate student, have been working on this, looking for a way that we can monitor resistance across fields, locations fairly easily. Previous insecticide resistance work we've done, the only work that was done was in 2008. Dave Schuster from Florida came up and his lab technician and did some resistance monitoring with neonicotinoid insecticides. And the method they use is very good for neonicotinoids and really is designed for systemic insecticides. So you could use it for neonicotinoids and diamides, but we need a technique for monitoring resistance for everything that we might use against whiteflies. And that's what Dr. Riley's been working on. Make a long story short, they looked at 4 different approaches. This tube technique that they've developed, the cup technique, petri dish technique, and clip cages. They looked at this across a couple of different populations, a variety of different insecticides. And what they actually found is that the clip cage provided the best mortality data, the cleanest mortality data. But these clip cages are very labor intensive. Doing this work is very labor intensive. They found that the tube technique they developed was much easier to do and provided good enough data to allow us to use it. And that's probably what we'll go forward with in the future for resistance monitoring. We can go into a field, collect adults with this yellow funnel, collect them into a tube very easily. You hold those, take them back to the lab, pour out the dead ones, and then expose the live ones to plants that you've grown in the greenhouse. You dip them so that they'll stay turgid and adults will feed. You can treat them. You could treat them with a systemic insecticide if you want, or you can treat the foliage by dipping it or spraying it and then exposing those whiteflies, field-collected whiteflies, to the foliage and getting mortality at 24 hours. So it's a very rapid bioassay, so we can monitor resistance and do it very easily across multiple locations. Now, that's strictly for adults. Something we've been playing with as far as trying to do similar work with immatures. We're growing plants in the greenhouse. We've got a colony we're trying to maintain year-round. We're growing plants in speedling trays, and we simply infest those plants by putting them into the colony. You could do the same thing with a heavy population in the field. Put those plants out in the field for 48 hours, allow whiteflies to oviposit on the plants. Then you bring those plants that have not been treated, you bring them back, you transplant them into individual pots. You're going to line them up and treat them with whatever insecticide you choose to treat at specific times after infestation. So if we want to target first instar nymphs, we can go in there at about a week after this infestation period because it's about a week for those eggs to hatch. If we want to target later instar nymphs, we can go in at 10, 12 days instead of a week after and target those larger nymphs. So really we can, there's a variety of things we can do there. We can look at effects on young versus old nymphs. We can also adjust our targets based on the product we're using. So if we're looking at NAC and we know it's primarily effective on eggs, we can target eggs. And then we're coming in and we're not trying to monitor mortality immediately. It's very hard, surprisingly, to tell if a nymph is dead or not. They're sessile, even if they're alive. So we can wait and give it, a week, 4 days to a week, and get those counts just before they emerge and get more accurate data. Now, the preliminary work we're doing with that, just show you here where we're looking at coragen, XRL, venom, Savanto, Pqz. We're doing it with and without surfactants. First of all, with young nymphs, for some reason we got poor results with coragen, but you see we got very good results with XRL, venom, Savanto Prime, and Pqz. Now, that same test done with older nymphs targeting a later stage, we got very poor control. Now, this is preliminary data. We're still working with trying to generate this information. But preliminarily, I would say it definitely shows you why we see much better control of whiteflies when we attack them early, that we can't really get behind whiteflies and try to catch up very readily. But that's just an overview of some of the work we're doing with insecticides and with insecticide resistance, and be glad to well, I appreciate your attention. Thank you.